Most of us have a favorite cocaine story. So this one is mine. Actually, some deans from Evergreen State came and interviewed me last month. And as one of the pioneers there, one of the first students, they said, it must have been so exciting back then to be a young person taking a chance on Evergreen, an alternative school like that. And they said, oh, fuck that shit. We knew it'd be a drug emporium. That's why we all showed up. And I said it was. You could get anything you wanted in that place within the hour. And I said, even cocaine, which, again, back in 1972 was very unusual. The whole coke thing came later in the 70s and primarily in the 80s. But there was a guy that I nicknamed Gollum. And he never read The Lord of the Rings because he thought it was some kind of compliment. And he had an incredible source for cocaine, and he had bags of it. And he sold some at Evergreen, but everybody I know is dead drunk. Dead broke and dead drunk. And we couldn't afford cocaine. He sold a lot of it in town. But here was the thing. If you would go to the house that he and his wife rented and played Monopoly with them, you could, there's all this coke you could snort there. And, only 4 or 5 people, whatever it is, could play Monopoly at a time. So he'd be playing Monopoly in the kitchen, and there'd be, at any time, like 15 to 20 guys from Evergreen would be there taking advantage of the coke. Because this was a totally new thing, snorting this powder for us. And so, like the rest of these losers, I would go over there to do it. And I kind of, hated myself for it. We were called the bullpen. You'd sit in the living room, ostensibly waiting to play Monopoly with Gollum. Oh, God. And, that was the first time. The thing I always remember is you'd have, a dozen guys sitting around with that washing machine jaw that you get on coke and, talking, and all you wanted to do was hide. So, of course, it was constipating, and I'd been there a few nights in a row. So somebody was in the guest bathroom, so I went into the one in the bedroom, and I sit down on the shitter, and, it's one of these places, I can't believe people who don't have stuff to read in their bathroom. And so there was nothing to read, and I'm sitting on the shitter, and I can't go, and there was a little bureau thing there, and I slid the door back, and there's a bag with white powder, and it's written on it is 3 pounds cocaine, first cut. And I thought, oh, that can't be true. And so, I opened it up. It was a plastic bag, and I didn't do some big Scarface thing where I buried my head in it. I tasted it, and sure enough, it was coke. So this is the only time in my life I ever stole drugs. And I went through some rationalizations first, like, well, if I come here all the time, I'm not going to steal any more than I would snort, and Gollum isn't going to miss this anyway, etc. And then I thought, fuck it. And I pull my pants up, I go into the kitchen, and there were guys there who used to talk about this later. I said, hey, Gollum. He goes, yeah, what is it? I said, you got a baggie? And he goes, oh, yeah, it's over there in the drawer. So I get the baggie, and I go back in there. Now, I don't know how much I actually took. At least 2 ounces.
Oh, God.
And I thought about this later when I had that pot stolen from me. When I get over the initial heartbreak, I think, well, you fucking asshole, this is karma. I mean, this is what you deserve after taking Gollum's cocaine. So I had this fucking baggie full of cocaine, and I went back to my house. Now, the kicker here is the house I lived in. I lived there with 2 other guys, but it was, this cheap suburban house. And for some reason, I'm sure they must not do this anymore in cold climates, they had the pipes in the ceiling. And we had this early, really bitter snowfall, and when it receded, the pipes burst, and the whole house fell apart, but except for my room that had basically been an add-on. So they moved out, but I just kept living there. There was no water, there was no electricity, and there was no, bathroom. I had to take my shits out in the woods that surrounded the place. But it was freezing cold. So what I'd done is I had this old sleeping bag, and I cut like a shield in the front so I could breathe and my face would stick out of it. And then I cut armholes. And I lived in that sleeping bag. And I'd won some money in a poker game. So I bought, 20, 30 cases. This is what I did with my money. Of 11-ounce Lucky Lager cold cases. And I lined them against the wall thinking this would be some sort of insulation. So I got back there with the Coke and I thought, this is my dream. Like Kerouac, he took a bunch of speed and wrote On the Road. I said, I'm gonna fucking write my On the Road with this cocaine. And so I had the only thing in there was, besides empty beer cans, was a crate that I had my portable typewriter on. And I had a cooler. There was a store up the street, and I'd get bologna and bread there, and I'd keep it in the cooler. And I had, and other than that, I only had the Coke and the beer and the cigarettes. And, I'm a chain smoker, so oh my God, there's no, I couldn't open a window because it was below freezing. So for the next 30 days, I didn't see anyone. I sat in that room typing my On the Road, snorting coke, drinking, chain smoking. And occasionally I'd have a bologna sandwich, and occasionally I think I slept. But I obviously passed into some kind of catonic state. Again, I don't remember much, but I thought, I'm doing this. I've got to sacrifice for the art. And there was just a little bit of the cocaine left, and my sinuses had been getting worse and worse. I woke up one morning and I was blind, I was fucking snow blind. I couldn't fucking see. And it only lasted for like 30 seconds, but I thought, oh my God, I snorted myself blind. And when I came out of it and I could sort of see again, I vowed, it was time to, and in the meanwhile, I'd never looked at anything I'd written. So I laid there for a couple days. I went through withdrawal. I remember some friend came by and gave me blankets. And so I was kind of warm, but I made a point of not looking at what I'd done. And, the irony of this is I was never able to do cocaine again. I could wait 10 years and do one line, and my sinuses would be so inflamed, it'd be like having a horrible cold for the next 6 weeks. So, as always, it's happened all my life, my body saved me from myself. But I didn't know that then. I was just stuffed up. So finally, I go through this insane withdrawal, and that was the other thing. I had to do all this by candlelight because there weren't any lights. So but I'd run out of candles a couple weeks before. But I thought, I know how to type. I don't need to look at what I'm doing. And so finally, I dry out. I'm all prepared, and the pages were piled all over the room, and I collected them. And the first day or two, apparently, that I'd written, there was some novel about it, an old man and his two sons. All I remember is the first line, the old man barfed. and so I reading it, I kind of held it together for the first couple days. And then, they say, if you put 100 monkeys in a room with typewriters and you leave them there for 10 years, one of them, the odds are, will write some Shakespeare. I was not one of those monkeys. This was the most useless, insane dribble I'd ever seen. Like, there'd be a word like taciturn and I think taciturn, and then I type it again and again and again. There'd be 3 pages of that word, and I thought, what the fuck? This isn't Kerouac. This is bullshit. So, that's the moral of the story. I took all that stuff, gathered it all together. There was an old trash barrel out back, and I put it all in there and I lit it, and it was the first time I'd been warm in a month.